Ladies and gentlemen, Hollywood is currently in shambles. People are not going to the movie theaters, and I kind of wanted to talk about some reasons about why I think that is. So, this past Memorial Day weekend was the worst box office performance for a Memorial Day weekend in decades. Furiosa and Garfield released that weekend, and they both bombed pretty massively. And I was very bummed to find that out because Furiosa is genuinely incredible. If you have not gone to go see it, which judging by the numbers, you haven't, please go watch this movie. It is like a Mad Max movie, but it's a prequel. You don't need to have seen any Mad Max movie in order to understand it. In fact, I had never watched a Mad Max movie when I went to go see it. But yeah, I mean, it was just a stark reminder of how terrible the box office landscape is. Earlier in the summer, we had The Fall Guy, which kicked everything off, and that movie was another massive flop. You know, it kind of did everything that you would think a movie would need to do. You get a big movie star and Ryan Gosling as the lead. You know, it got good reviews and all that. But audiences are just like, I don't care. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is kind of the best performing movie of the summer so far. But even still, it's not doing great. And apparently it's also very good. I actually haven't gotten around to watching that, so my apologies. I'm not helping this situation at all. But the big question is, why aren't people showing up to the theater? So I think the first obvious reason is this current era of streaming. I think that these studios have, quite frankly, dug their own grave by pushing streaming as hard as they have. You can really trace the roots of this back to COVID. I mean, I totally get that at the time, everybody was scrambling. They were trying to figure out a way that they could possibly survive. But I think when you had that stretch of time where, you know, Warner Brothers were putting all their movies on Max, Disney were putting their movies on Disney Plus, you know, other studios were putting movies on like straight to VOD and whatnot. I think that permanently scarred the psyche of a lot of people, and they just stopped valuing movies as a thing that is worth the effort of spending a bunch of money to go out to see in a movie theater. I think people have just caught on to the fact that, I can just watch it when it comes to streaming, and I think that they are perfectly fine waiting a couple weeks. Because that's the other thing. Sure, they've realized how stupid it was to put their movies on streaming instead of in theaters, but they haven't rolled it back enough in my opinion. Oftentimes, I will see a movie be released straight to VOD like a couple weeks after it comes out in theaters, and I just think that that's super detrimental to the exhibition industry. And I understand that these are oftentimes movies that have bombed at the box office, and they're like, okay, well, we might as well get as much money back as we can by selling it on home VOD. But even though you're trying to salvage as much money as you can from this one specific project, all the studios doing this combined is creating a culture where audiences can reliably get these movies a couple weeks to a month after they're in theaters. And so that simply does not incentivize them to go. FOMO was a real thing that drove people to watch movies in theaters. And these practices by these studios, I think, are really hurting that dynamic. That being said, it's not just the studios, because the theaters themselves have their own issues. It's pretty gosh darn expensive to go watch a movie. I mean, not only do you have to buy the ticket, but generally speaking, if you're going to the movie theater, you're gonna want popcorn, you're gonna want a soda, maybe even a candy. Now, I personally am more or less okay with that, just because I understand that that is how movie theaters make their money. But at the end of the day, most customers aren't gonna know or care about that. They're just seeing these insane prices and going, yeah, I'm good, I can wait for movies to come to streaming. And yeah, speaking of concessions, I mean, the quality of the concessions, I think, could use an improvement. Like at the movie theater that I go to, the popcorn simply is not very good. I'll eat it. I don't have high standards, but I can recognize that it's just not especially good. Stuff like nachos and pizza are not only overinflated in price, but are unironically like high school cafeteria tier meals. Like, I'm not saying I need a 5-star meal from a movie theater, but if it was like a Domino's tier pizza or like a Chipotle tier nachos, I mean, that would just make going to a movie theater and potentially eating a meal there while watching the movie a lot more appealing. Now, the next thing that I want to bring up is something that I personally just don't ever have to deal with. I'm just being honest. I feel like I've gotten very lucky. But every time I hear people talking about this, I hear all of these horror stories of people fighting at the movies, of, couples like making out in the middle of a movie, people talking loudly, people being on their phones. And again, maybe I'm just lucky, but it's just not something that I've ever had to deal with. But with the amount of times that I've heard people complain about this, I feel like it's pretty clearly an issue. And, I think an obvious thing that should be addressed is, well, maybe Hollywood should just be making better movies. And I think that's completely fair perspective. I think when it comes to a lot of the major brands that used to be a staple of like the 2010s, like the big money winners like Marvel and DC and Star Wars, I mean, I don't think that there's any doubt that the deterioration of those brands have almost certainly stopped people from watching those movies as much. I think that almost certainly has a domino effect of people just straight up going to the movies less. But I think, like I mentioned earlier, movies like The Fall Guy, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and Furiosa are good movies. So I also just don't think it's as simple as that, because when Hollywood does make good movies, people still don't go see them. So yeah, those are just some reasons as to why I think that people aren't going to the movies as much. To be honest with you, I am kind of black-pilled on the state of the industry. Like, when it comes to streaming, I think it is entirely possible that those damages are permanent. I think it is entirely possible that it is just one of those phases in entertainment, whether it be like moving from, VHS to DVD, whether it be arcades becoming irrelevant because video game consoles at home got really good. I honestly think it's possible that people just prefer streaming. And I think more so than with music or video games, I think that is a fundamental problem, because the truth is that streaming is not lucrative enough to support the industry. It's pretty clear at this point in the streaming wars that not everybody can sustain a streaming service. So if theaters go under, I don't think that streaming is going to be a safe haven for studios to release their movies. In the aftermath of COVID, it's become abundantly clear that studios need box office revenue. So while you might prefer just watching movies at home, that's totally fine. I'm not here to tell you what to do. All I'm saying is that I don't think the industry can survive on that model. And, I'll be honest, as corny as it might sound, I do think that the movie theater experience is kind of magical. There is simply no way that Furiosa is going to hit it hard watching it at home as it was in the movie theater. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind watching stuff at home, but when I'm at home, I'm like constantly being distracted by stuff. I always have to like fight off the urge to just start scrolling on Twitter and stuff. Being forced to sit in a dark room with a giant screen, booming sound, it really does help me just get fully engrossed in whatever I'm watching. This is undoubtedly a very scary moment in the industry, and we'll see if like box office picks up from here. So let me know what you think about all of that. What is the last movie you watched in the movie theater? Give me some of your reasons as to why you just don't go to watch movies anymore. And for God's sake, go watch Furiosa. Bye.